Welcome back to our series on Brahms's Opus 122 chorale preludes and the performance of them. And today I'd like to look at the first of the two settings of Herzlich, mich, verlangen. You know, if we talk about a German Baroque chorale, then perhaps this hymn with its 1601 melody by Herzlich is the very first melody which comes to mind. That's partly because of its repeated use in Bach's St. Matthew Passion, but also because it's found its way into modern hymn books throughout the world. In fact, it's rather curious, if we just glance back for a moment at the Orgel Büchlein series, that not only did Bach not write a setting of it for Orgel Büchlein, but he didn't even include it in the list of hymns which he was intending to write a setting for and never got round to. And in fact, just off the top of my head, the only chorale prelude I can just think of by Bach on that melody is that simple and lovely B minor 1, which is in what we term the miscellaneous chorale preludes nowadays. So Brahms sets this melody twice in the Opus 122, as he does also with O Welt, ich muss dich lassen. As soon as we start to look at the Opus 122, we see immediately that Brahms is very sparing with performance directions, be it tempo indications or dynamics. In fact, there's only two tempo indications in the set. There's an adagio and there's a molto moderato. And by and large, he restrains himself to F and P as dynamic directions. In just a couple of instances, there's a PP, but that only really happens when he's making an echo effect off a P. So it's just a rather special exception. There's also, I think, one MF somewhere, but that's about the lot. So when we're looking at these dynamics, the F and the P in this particular piece, then all we really need is a contrast between the two. I think that we can't read too much into exactly what Brahms is intending with his F or with his P. It's pretty safe to say that Mendelssohn said that P translates to a couple of quiet 8-foot stops, and that sounds very reasonable. F, in this particular case, can mean principles perhaps 8 and 4, maybe even 8 and 4 and 2, but we don't want to make too vast a dynamic contrast. I think Brahms is just simply saying, this is the loud bit, this is the quiet bit. As somebody pointed out in the comments to one of the other episodes, Brahms was very sensitive to the words of the hymns on which these preludes are based. And we see in this particular piece that the very lyrical 6/8 section that's marked P in this piece corresponds to the line of the hymn which expresses the desire to be in a better world, while the F sections at the beginning and the end refer respectively to the troubles of this world and to the joys of the world to come. So there's a very clear division there in line with the text of the hymn. People sometimes suggest that the vagueness of the dynamic markings in these pieces is indicative that Brahms was unenthusiastic about or inexperienced in the organ as an instrument. And there's really no justification for that. We do know that Brahms enjoyed playing the organ throughout his life, even if he wasn't primarily a professional organist. And he certainly knew what he was doing with the instrument and what he wanted from it. I think probably it's more a case that Brahms was more interested in the music itself than in the instrument or in the effects which the instrument could portray. And in addition, as we pointed out in the introductory video, the one on Es ist ein Ross entsprungen, Brahms's organ world was more conservative than we give it credit for sometimes. That is to say, the instruments with which Brahms was familiar and which Brahms was anticipating were not those vast cathedral organs with a range of swell boxes and registration aids and mechanical features that enable a very elaborate scheme of registration. So I think Brahms simply wasn't particularly interested and focused primarily on the music and what he wanted to say through it. But there is one awkward corner in this piece which suggests rather that Brahms wasn't wearing his organ shoes when he was composing, and that's the transition from the common time section into that lyrical 6/8p section. Where do we move manuals? Because we obviously have to change manuals at that point. The P direction actually comes at the beginning of the bar, but that doesn't make any sense in terms of the music itself. There is a anacrusis throughout the piece, and so it's very obvious that the right hand starts with the upbeat at the end of that previous bar. That's fair enough, but what about the left hand? There is really no obvious place to transfer the left hand from the one manual to the other. And I think there we just need to fudge it as best we can. Again, Brahms wasn't perhaps thinking primarily of the instrument as he was writing it. He wasn't primarily concerned with that, and we make the best solution that we can find of it.